Yes. Woo! Anniversary!
Yay! Number 2.
2 years. 2 years. So we'll give people a minute or two for them to get their emails. I know I'm seeing an ad, but I have not yet gotten the Handelabra went live email. Let's just double check that. Because I would hate for people to miss any of this wonderful anniversary listening party.
Yeah.
Which is going to be so fun. There it is. Handelabra Games just went live. Fantastic. So yes, it is noon on October 14th. It's not our actual anniversary. That's not until Sunday. But we like to kick things off when we're actually in the office. So hello, everyone, and welcome, one and all, to a very special episode of Sentinels Live. I'm Jeremy, President and CEO of Handelabra Games, and your Master of Ceremonies today. As I just mentioned, this Sunday will mark 2 full years since we first launched Sentinels of the Multiverse on iPad and Android tablets. In that time, we've accomplished so much, and we could not have done it without you, the fans, the players, dare I say, the real Sentinels of the Multiverse. Since then, we've launched on Steam for PC and Mac. Then we launched on Steam for Linux. We are also now available on smartphones, both Android and iOS. And we've launched multiplayer. We've launched a ton of expansion packs. All of Season 1. We've begun Season 2. We had a wildly successful Kickstarter where we raised over $144,000. And we just could not be more excited for what the future now holds. So for the next couple of hours, probably 2 to 3, I'm guessing, we'll be revisiting the last couple of years, reminiscing and ruminating while we play Sentinels of the Multiverse, listen to some music, and generally just have a heck of a good time. The rest of the Handelabra Games team will be joining me shortly, but first, I thought we would take a quick trip down memory lane. We first met Greater Than Games at PAX Prime in 2011, and pretty soon after that, we started bugging them to let us bring the game to digital. And then, in early 2013, we finally finished crossing the T's and dotting the lowercase j's and signed a contract. And so, in July of that year, we announced to the world that Sentinels of the Multiverse would be coming to Android, tablets, and iPad with the following. So who remembers that? Who was a Sentinels fan from way back when and remembers when we first launched that? That was before a lot of things. Most importantly, it was before we had Jean-Marc. So the music is just stock, boring music that we hadn't really done any real due diligence on. But it got the job done. It started to get people psyched. You'll also notice that we pegged the release on that at spring of 2014. So we did end up being a little bit off. But once Handelabra Games really got moving, it was just about a year after that announcement that we were ready to tell the world when they would actually be able to play Sentinels of the Multiverse on their tablets. And when that came around, we released this.
You claim to fight for freedom. But yours is a legacy of destruction, a legacy of death. It matters not who you surround yourself with, Mr. Parsons. No nation, no heroes, no sentinels you can assemble can hope to stand in the face of the inevitable. The moon is a constant reminder of the passage of time. Is it not fitting that now the end of your time is also the end of the moon's time? I will leave your world in ruins. Whatever remains will be mine.
Yes, so that was the very first teaser trailer, which I believe was also the first time anybody heard any of the cool new original music that was composed for us by Jean-Marc. So, we kept working diligently, and as mentioned, we launched the game on October 16th, 2014. 2 years ago, this coming Sunday. So today's stream will begin with our next retro listening viewing party, which appropriately will cover the music and environments from the core game. As you may recall, we promised these for you. It was a squish goal, or stretch goal, squish goal? It was one of the goals from the Kickstarter back in April and May, that we would give all the old music that we hadn't gotten around to the same treatment that we're giving the new music and do listening parties. And so we figured this was the perfect opportunity to go back and revisit the original game. And so to get that started, let's all give a warm welcome to our resident maestro, Jean-Marc Giffen. Say hi, Jean-Marc.
Hello, everybody.
And as has become our wont in these listening/viewing parties, also joining us now is our environmental artist. Of course, that is not all she does for us, far from it. But Jennifer, say hi, Jennifer.
Hello, everybody.
Cool. All right. So now the rest of the team will be joining us throughout the afternoon. I believe John and Krista are in the chat right now. So if you've never attended one of these listening viewing parties before, let me just explain the format a little bit. Basically, we're going to go through each of the pieces of music that were composed for the core game. We'll do a quick intro about it. We'll listen to it, so completely, clean, so that, because usually you hear it's got sound effects from the game over it, et cetera, et cetera. And while you're watching, you're also going to get to see some of the artwork from the game in a way that you don't usually get to see it, because it's got cards over it and other kinds of things, and it's cropped to fit in the windows. So we intro it, listen to it, and then we'll chat a little bit about it afterwards. So kicking us off today is the most ubiquitous piece of music in all the multiverse. You just heard a little snippet of it in that trailer. In some places we call it the main theme, but its title is actually simply The Sentinels of the Multiverse. And since anyone who's actually played Sentinels has likely heard this piece of music potentially countless times, we decided to do something a little bit special with it to kick off today's listening viewing party. So take a trip down memory lane with us as we listen to The Sentinels of the Multiverse. And we're back. So what'd you guys think of that? I want to give big ups to Krista, who created that video for us. Well done,
Woo!
Ketchup Rocket.
Yeah.
Yeah, very nice.
So tell us about that music, Jean-Marc.
Excuse me. Just getting over a cold now. So, yeah, so as everyone has no doubt heard by now, that was the Sentinels of the Multiverse, the theme song. And obviously when we were thinking about what that was going to be, we knew it, we kind of had to get it right because of how frequently it would be played. Every time you load up the game, there it was going to be, and in all the trailers, there it was going to be. So we talked to Greater Than Games to see if they had anything in mind, and I don't remember their exact words, but it was something along the lines of, well, we don't really know, but we'll know it when we hear it. So I had to kind of guess what it was that they were going to know when they heard. And so I tried a few different piano sketches, and that one that the main theme that was actually the first thing that came into my head. And I tried some other ideas, but when we passed it by the team in Greater Than Games, they said that they really liked the first one the best. And that's the one I liked the best too. But they did like another one, although it was kind of short. But they said it was they said it would actually make a good intro to the song, and so that's why the introduction of the song, that da 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 da, is just there at the beginning, and then once it kicks in, that's the last you hear of it, was because they felt like it would make this big, like, sort of heroic kind of triumphant entry into it before things really start moving along. So we ended up combining two of them together to form the theme song. So those were all just piano sketches at that point, and I was kind of thinking about what it would actually sound like. And I decided to go with kind of a early 90s Saturday morning superhero cartoon kind of vibe to it, which a lot of them had kind of like a sort of upbeat, sort of positive rock kind of feeling with, sort of a really powerful lead guitar. And so I knew I wouldn't be able to get away with using virtual instruments, and I'm not a guitarist. So we got, I remembered a guitarist I really liked from Overclocked Remix, whose name is Dan Arose, and he's very talented and made some prog rock remixes of video game music I really like for Axelay. And so we called him up, and he was on board and played the live guitars and the bass for this. And so we mixed it together, and I said, I just thought, oh, there's something missing there. And so I added a bit of keyboard, and then the symphonic elements, just the strings there. And I was like, because I just felt like it was just a bit too much, just like a rock song, and didn't have that sort of soaring quality to it. So once I added those in, I was really getting happy with the results, and so was the team. Now, some of you said, I really like this version. I don't know if you were referring to the version of the music, but so after like 1.5 years, I realized that my mixing skills when I did the original theme weren't particularly good. I wouldn't say they're great now, but they're better than they were then. And so I just did a new mix of the same theme that's a bit punchier. It's less boomy and stuff like that. Some people might notice, some people might not, but if you put them back to back, I think you'd hear the difference. So...
Well, and also one of the other things I remember you saying about that was that when you're using it in the game, you don't want it to be quite so punchy and aggressive because, it's a menu. It's supposed to kind of, at least a little bit, blend into the background. It's not supposed to be accosting you over the head. And so, punching up the mix and making a more sort of rocky version of it just for listening, not in the menu, seemed like a pretty interesting idea.
Yeah, well, that was the thing, is that now that we had this new mix, we're like, oh, do we put this in the game? And I thought, well, I mean, it does stand out a bit more, and if you were only going to hear it once through, that'd probably be fine. But, sometimes you're sitting in the lobby for a little while or whatever. And so, I thought that sort of having the more subdued mix that's already in the game is probably appropriate to avoid listening fatigue.
Exactly. And so we figured if we're not going to use this in the game, I feel like we got to use it for something. So we figured, well, Jean-Marc figured, and he asked me, and I said, why not? Let's just give it to everybody for free. So if you guys head on over to sentinelsdigital.com right now, I'll put the link in the chat for you. You'll notice on the anniversary banner at the top that there's an anniversary giveaway download. You get a couple things in that, actually. You get this new mix of the Sentinels theme, which is awesome, as you just heard. You're also going to get the commemorative wallpaper, which you might have been able to download yesterday from the site, from the blog, but you can get it right in there as well. Plus, we also went ahead and made you a ringtone. A couple of people have been asking about the villains of the Multiverse theme that we used in the Kickstarter video, and that's going to be part of Season 2. So we made a quick little ringtone of that because it's a nice little fun twist on the heroic theme. So you can get that as well. So go head over to sentinelsdigital.com and you can download the cool little anniversary pack giveaway. That's kind of surprise number 1, but there's going to be more, so don't you worry. All right. So moving on, the next theme that the next piece of music we're gonna listen to is the sort of quintessential mad scientist of the game, Baron Blade. The song is called Baron Blade's Legacy of Lunacy. So Fyodor Ramanat was a Lithuanian commander of a weapons research and development plan for the USSR. He and his team developed a shrink ray to help them win the war against the United States. The US responded by sending a team of superheroes led by America's greatest legacy. The battle was devastating for both sides, as the Soviets had some super soldiers of their own, and it ended with the entire factory engulfed in flames and collapsing in on itself. Only Legacy himself was able to leave the wreckage alive. Fyodor left behind a wife and son, but sadly, the widow also died as a result of the poor conditions and a broken heart. This left their son, 13-year-old Ivan Ramanat, to fend for himself. Ivan was brilliant, assembled his own loyal following. He rebuilt the plant that had collapsed and vowed revenge on the Legacy family and their allies. He successfully killed the Legacy that defeated his father, but not before Paul Parsons, the next in the Legacy line, was already discovering his powers of impenetrable skin. Unable to defeat Legacy himself, Baron Blade instead would destroy him internally by building a terralunar impulsion beam that would pull the moon into the Earth and destroy the world around him. Alright, so that is Baron Blade's Legacy of Lunacy.
So, making Baron Blade's theme also took careful consideration. Because he's like, sort of the iconic main villain of Sentinels. And, in fact, he's actually become almost more main than Legacy in terms of our video game, because he's the main icon, and our CEO dresses up as him all the time because he actually is him.
Exactly.
So we couldn't just take his theme lightly either. And for this one, there were 3 main influences. Great Indian Games really wanted sort of an older, like, USSR kind of style to it, sort of like a march almost, but more of an anthem, I guess. And so that's why it starts out with sort of that da 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 da, was kind of to mimic that a little bit. But then also we added in some mad scientist sounds, i.e. the theremin, to kind of give it that mad scientist vibe. And then one of Jeremy's references was Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog. And so there were sort of a lot of percussive elements in that. So that's why it kind of switches to that. That's to kind of mimic that a bit. And then the ending was just kind of a combination of all those elements before it loops. And at first Jeremy wasn't sure about it, specifically the first part, but that was something Greater Than Games felt was important to his character. So I think it all worked out.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, we've talked before on these listening parties about the way that we work in terms of, gathering influences and then, coming up with some stuff and sending it and doing back and forth. It is definitely a collaborative process. There have been many times where, maybe not many times. There have been a few times where we've gone to them and they're like, yeah, that's just not right. It's not what we envisioned. Let's try this again. But there have actually been other times where they're like, yeah, I'm not really sure. And we convincingly make our case. Like, no, like, listen to it from this point of view and think about it or whatever. And they're like, yeah, you know what? I guess you're right. And so, they're really open to hearing other people's ideas about, other people's interpretations of these characters and what they might be. All right, so that was Baron Blade's Legacy of Lunacy. But there's a second Baron Blade in the game. Legacy has destroyed the Terralunar Impulsion Beam, but that has not stopped him. Changing his approach, he's developed and hidden bombs all over Megalopolis. He's toying with the heroes and giving them a chance to find them before... I'm sorry, I'm tripping over what you wrote here. He's toying with the heroes and giving them a chance to find them in time, before he destroys the whole city. Can the heroes save the city, or will it be destroyed? This is the Mad Bomber Blade. Truly a mad bomber. So tell us a little bit about this, Jean-Marc.
Sure, yeah. So basically Greater Than Games said that they wanted some like factory sounds and stuff like that. So that's why like you kind of hear all that machinery, that like mostly percussion elements like anvils and stuff like that. And also I replaced the main theremin with sort of a buzzsaw kind of sound to give it the kind of that impression of machines making all these bombs. And of course, I had to sneak in one of those cartoony whistle bomb drops in there just to kind of emphasize what all this noise was all about.
Because, of course, you got to.
Yeah.
Right on.
So.
All right, so next up, we're going to have our first environment from the core game. Jennifer, why don't you tell us a little bit about Megalopolis?
All right. Well, Megalopolis is the largest city in the world and the hub of finance, culture, and new ventures. Tourism, entertainment, and culture all thrive in this giant metropolis. It is also the home of Legacy and the home base of the Freedom Five.
All right, so this is Megalopolis. and welcome back from your trip to Megalopolis.
All right, so yeah, when composing this music, this was actually the last of the environment songs that I did, because I was the least sure about what it should sound like. The other ones you have some sort of an idea based on their theme, but this was like, what does a city sound like? And so I think my original thought was something jazzier, but then we decided to kind of save that for Rook City. So I thought, well, it has to be kind of somewhat triumphant and majestic, but especially at this point when we were just kind of establishing what the music would even be, Jeremy really wanted to emphasize like there's conflict going on here, so it shouldn't just be like music of the environment. Since then we've kind of not tried to overdo too much of the conflict stuff, because sometimes it just doesn't fit into the kind of environment it is. But this was actually where we kind of started this idea of like making sure that some of the music is active and stuff is going on, and then some of it's more subdued or down tempo. And it just so happened that the other environments that we were doing kind of worked out like that too. And so the first part is kind of like a mixture of like, I think my main influence for that was like JRPG battle music. I played a lot of those during the SNES, Super Nintendo era, and PlayStation, first PlayStation. And I kind of took it from that approach. Took some of the standard rhythms from that and combined them together to make a new rhythm, and then kind of mixed that with some more like triumphant sounds, because this is a bustling metropolis that has succeeded and stuff like that. So I wanted to emphasize that here and there, and then it's like, oh yeah, there's still a fight going on.
Well, and didn't we also talk a little bit about this, like maybe calling out like sort of the Avengers or like other sort of superhero team, like Justice League-y kind of stuff? Was that with this environment that we talked about that?
We did, and then when I listened to it, I thought none of it really sounded like environment music. So,
sure, okay.
So it didn't really end up having any real connection to that. But the second part there, where it becomes more serious and stuff like that and subdued, that was kind of influenced by like, there's usually a scene in any show or movie or whatever where it looks like the heroes might lose, or like they're all down for the count or something, something like some scene like that. And so that's sort of what inspired the second part. Is it's like, uh-oh, things are looking bad, are they gonna come back from it? But then of course they do, because they're the heroes.
All right, so Jennifer, tell us a little bit about making Megalopolis in 3D. I know a lot of people were noticing that some of the artwork has actually evolved since the first iteration of the game, but then we're also adding some more stuff in. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, yeah, you are correct that it has evolved. I was not the original. I was not the first person to work on Megalopolis. Someone else started Megalopolis, and then I've been adding to it. And so one thing that happens with the environments is every so often, like, I'll go through them and, update a few things. So, I know some people noticed, like, the guy's graffiti and the Citizen Dawn ads and stuff like that. And another thing that I'm doing in general right now is going through all of the environments and adding more cameras to help prepare for Season 2. But, yeah, Megalopolis, it's, because it's a large city, and so I really wanted to make it not just a generic big city, which is why there's, and then the best way I could think of to do that was to add in some little references to Sentinels things, and some stuff that's inspired by the card artwork. So you might have noticed that that there's a new traffic pileup scene in Megalopolis and things like that. I guess that's the And then there's like you'll see the monorail and in the background and some of the views, or the monorail tracks if you don't see the monorail.
Very cool.
And yep.
Right on. So yeah, so that is Megalopolis. We're gonna move on to the next villain in the lineup. Dawn Cohen has always had the mysterious ability to absorb light sources and use them as if they are her own energy source. With this ability, she could fly, blast, destroy, or repair. However, exposure of this power caused her to be poked and prodded by the normal people, and she was just sick of it. So she set up a new home on Insula Primalis and invited other powerful individuals like herself to join the Citizens of the Sun. Together, they would show the world that they are not weak or strange, but in fact, gods among men. So this is Citizen Dawn. So tell us a little bit about Citizens to Victory, Jean-Marc.
Sure, yeah. So I originally, excuse me, Greater Than Games originally wanted it to be sort of like an anthem. And so I had this idea of there being Citizen Dawn, who would be represented by the French horn. And then there would be all these other instruments representing the other citizens. So she would send out a call, which was da 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 da, and then all the other citizens are responding to her in a chorus, da 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 da. Which, if there were lyrics to it, I think it would be "Citizens Rise," but there aren't. So. But that's sort of always what I heard, was they were responding with "Citizens Rise, Citizens Rise." But originally it didn't have the drum beat or the rock elements to it. It was just sort of just the anthem itself, and it was a bit more free time as well. And we sent that to Christopher, and he was like, I like the idea behind it and the melody and stuff, but it just feels a bit too sparse and it doesn't have as much impact. So then he sent me like a reference, I think from Gladiator, and I was like, oh, okay, I see what he actually wants. And so, that's when I added sort of the drums and the guitars and the bass, and then I added the second part where it goes like da 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 da. That was added afterwards, and then everyone was much happier with it, and it still kept that kind of call and response at the beginning that I felt kind of represented this idea of a leader and her sort of her comrades or fellow super villains. So
very cool. All right, so as mentioned, Citizen Dawn calls Insula Primalis home. That is where she gathers her citizens of the sun, which brings us to our next environment. So, Jennifer, why don't you tell us a little bit about Insula Primalis?
All right. I feel like we could have an entire live stream just about Insula Primalis.
We totally could.
All right. Insula Primalis is located in the Arctic Circle, and it is a curiosity of nature. An isolated island warmed by hydrothermal springs and an active volcano. It is also home to primitive plants and dinosaurs as if they had never suffered the extinction of their species. It was discovered by Canadian reconnaissance pilots and was briefly considered as an operating base for NATO, but was never completed due to its hostile environment. The partially completed base was taken over by Citizen Dawn and her citizens of the sun who are able to live in such an environment without fear.
All right, so this is Insula Primalis. All right, so that was Insula Primalis.
Yeah, so for this one, I definitely needed to have a much more primitive feel to it. And so I put a lot of heavy focus on percussion and more ethnic instruments. I originally wasn't going to have any instruments that had sort of man-made material, like nothing made of metal or anything like that. But I found that it just needed sort of a little bit of an extra punch, so I added the brass to it and kind of filled out the space. But I would have to say that my influence sort of around this was Donkey Kong Country, especially the second half there, where it's just sort of the drums and some light sounds and stuff like that. That was particularly influenced by the second part of the Donkey Kong Country series. And so, but actually, this environment has a lot sort of to be said from it, from our side, development side, because this was the first piece of music that I did for Sentinels. It was the first piece of music that Handelabra and Greater Than Games heard from me, actually, related to the game. Just a quick story about doing music for Sentinels. I wasn't even originally approached about doing the music for it. It was a friend of a friend of mine, a friend of mine referred me to a friend of his, John, because he was interested in looking for a programmer, and he knew that I did some programming work. And so I met up with him, and we kind of discussed it a bit, and then somehow it came up that they would need a composer, or that I did music, and then they're like, oh, we don't have one yet, can you send us what you have? And at that point, most of what I had was just chip tunes, and I remember Jeremy saying to me during our initial meeting together, he's like, so can you make not chip tunes? Because I don't think we're gonna have chip tunes in this game, and although it's kind of funny because we have made a chip tune for it, but I said, well, yeah, I can handle that. It was because, the main thing there was that I did like orchestration and stuff at university, but I never did it with virtual instruments before, and so that was going to be my first challenge, and this was the first one that I used virtual instruments to do, and then I sent it over, and then they're like, oh, this works. So. You've proven what you said you could do. So yeah, that's sort of how all that got started. Do we want to talk about the environment art and sort of the story there?
Yeah, well, and similar to how Jean-Marc said this was the first piece of music, this was also the first environment that we built in 3D. So tell us a little bit about that, Jen.
It was an experience.
It was that.
One thing I'll say about Insula Primalis is there's been more iterations of it, of like the arrangement of the models, the cameras, and everything than any other environment we've worked on.
And I think similar to Megalopolis, this was not first. You were not the first person to work on this environment, correct?
Correct. I was the third or fourth person to work on it.
Yeah, we had actually initially contracted someone who swore up and down that they could make an amazing environment for us, and they tried really hard, but it was clear that they had slightly overinflated their resume, and maybe they had done a little bit of work, but they had never done something quite on the scale that we were looking for. And so a couple of people had to go back in and try and sort of salvage what we could from what had been made.
Yeah. So I guess maybe I'll talk about the new things in Insula Primalis that are there that weren't there originally. So for people who've been playing the game for all along, you'll notice there's some new cameras with some pink clouds in the background and more dinosaurs, and there's a triceratops in Insula Primalis now, who there actually was not originally a triceratops in Insula Primalis. got the Triceratops for Time Cataclysm, and then I was like, wait, we need to put that in Insula Primalis. And the terrain for Insula Primalis wasn't quite big enough to add more to, so I actually made a second terrain in the project for some of the new cameras, and then for the Triceratops, and then the new River of Lava / Obsidian Field, and it's more subtle now because, but there is like a T-Rex like chasing some raptors, which I got a kick out of adding that in.
Because I mean, how are you gonna have Insula Primalis without a bunch of dinosaurs running around?
Right, there just have to be, and yeah, almost every camera has a pterodactyl flying around. So
very cool. Yeah, and so you will see more of those new bits and pieces in the coming months as we start adding. A lot of these new views are actually going to be added to the game. Some of that is in support of the fact that Vengeance can now have more distinct areas of the screen shown, and so we needed more views of each environment so you could see different things. So you'll start seeing those popping up in the game at least around the time Vengeance comes out, but potentially before then, depending on how how our update cycle goes. So.
Yeah, every single environment in the game is
getting an update. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So XK9000 Alpha was supposed to be a fully automated defense technologies factory which would design and create its own military-grade robots. However, upon gaining sentience, its first thought was that the root problem of any potential defense requirement was the human race. It now seeks to destroy the entire race as part of its own protocols. Because as you all know, Omnitron persists. Yes, Omnitron persists. Tell us about it, Jean-Marc.
Sure. So previously we played the Omnitron 4 environment, and similar to that, most of the sounds here are actually a number of like primitive computer sounds and synth sounds, and you probably got that sense as you were listening to it. It was also the first time I messed around with like glitchy sounds and stuff like that, so re-triggering and like bends fading out and stuff like that. Yeah, so it kind of had to sound sort of menacing, but also sort of ambiguous to its own evil, because it's just kind of doing what it's programmed to do. So I didn't want, I didn't want it to sound like end of the world kind of villain, even though it was out to destroy, but just sort of like it was just processing its own code, and all that glitchiness and stuff in there was just to kind of represent it, kind of trying to process its own thoughts through everything else that was going on. And so an interesting thing with this one, and related to Insula Primalis, which we just heard, was that one of the original ideas we had for this game, for the music, was to actually have villain themes and environment themes sort of together. So you would hear the environment theme like playing the whole time, and then at certain parts the villain would have a chance to put in its own motif there, so that do 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 was originally overlapped with the Insula Primalis environment music at one point, and I think if you put them together now it would still work. But yeah, the idea was that, like every combination of villains and environments that you chose would give you something new to listen to. But unfortunately, that got kind of really complicated in terms of making it work for everybody. And because like every time we added a new environment or villain, we would have to do all that work to make all those crossovers. The amount of permutations was just going to get too high. And
and especially because at that point we didn't even know how many villains and environments would even be in the game at that point. I think when we first started working on this, I want to say Wrath of the Cosmos had come out, but Villains wasn't even out yet, and we hadn't even heard anything about Oblivion yet.
Yeah, I think it was right after Vengeance came out. But yeah, it was just sort of like, this isn't really going to work. And so we originally were just going to have one sort of you lose music, which we'll actually hear soon. But Jeremy really didn't want to abandon the idea of each villain having their own theme song. And he's like, what if when you lose the game to a villain, it played a theme for them? And that's pretty much exactly what happened from that point. So
that's why I'm the boss.
Yeah. So I took what I originally composed to be a part of Insula Primalis and turned it into its own piece, which was the one you just heard. And then Jeremy's like, "Yep, that's what we're doing."
Exactly. Very cool. All right. Well, after Omnitron's destruction at the hands of the heroes, cosmic entities sought out its remaining pieces. I think we might have some hints as to what that cosmic entity might be. The forces gathered together as much as they could and reassembled Omnitron with pure cosmic energy. The forces watched the ensuing destruction from a vast distance away, disinterested in the outcome of its own experiment. So this is Omnitron Persists, Omnitron 2. right, so that was Omnitron 2, known colloquially as Cosmic Omnitron.
Yeah, so that was actually the first variant music we tried. Originally we kind of were thinking, okay, do we use the same villain theme when we have a variant, or do we have a different one, an all-new one? And I said, well, an all-new one would be a lot of work. And then we kind of, and not only would an all-new one be a lot of work, but for me, I think it's really important that once you have a character theme, you use that theme in every reference of them somehow. Even if it's just an illusion or something like that. So we decided, well, what if it's just like the same thing, but we change the instruments a bit and make them sound more cosmic. So I would say that this is the variant with the least amount of changes made to it. I think I only just changed the instrumentation around a little bit. And it was just sort of like a comparison for, what our standard would be as to how different it needs to be from the original. And then I kind of stepped it up a little bit more with Mad Bomber Blade when I actually started adding new parts to it. And so each variant is kind of its own case into how different or similar it is to the original one.
Very cool. All right, so we've had a couple people asking if they've missed the surprises, and so I will just reiterate that the first of the surprises was already mentioned, and that is that the new mix of the Sentinels theme song can be downloaded for free from sentinelsdigital.com. I went ahead and just put that link in there again. But we also wanted to mention another little bit of a surprise for you, also in the realm of music, since we're in the listening, viewing portion here, and that is that when we did our last listening party, you got to hear the Temple of Zhulong, which is the new environment from the Season Pass preview pack. And we realized that everybody who backed us on Kickstarter is going to be getting that song for free in the Villains and Vengeance soundtrack that everybody who backed us on Kickstarter is getting. So Jean-Marc said, well, can't we just give them that song now since it's already done? So if you guys go to your backer kit, you'll notice a new digital download in there of the single for the Temple of Zhulong, because we figured why make you guys wait, however long it's going to be before that soundtrack comes out. So surprise, surprise, you get more free music. So yeah, head to your backer kit page and check that out. So that is surprise number 2. So now we're going to be moving on to the next environment in our list, which is the Wagner Mars base. Tell us about it, Jen.
All right. Well, the Wagner Mars base is a hub for planetary research and supports over 1,000 scientists doing a variety of projects. It is even equipped with state-of-the-art weapons and a self-destruct sequence just in case. It would be a shame if it fell into the wrong hands.
Such a shame. So here is the Wagner Mars base. We have extinguished the fire in the blogosphere, as I like to say. So tell us about Wagner Mars Bay, Jean-Marc.
Sure. So when we talked to Greater Than Games about it, they said, something a little bit more with metallic sounds, electronic, basically the opposite of Insula Primalis. And I also thought it'd be kind of nice to make it a bit more upbeat, have a bit of a solid beat to it. I guess it's slightly like 90s clubbish, but only just, a little bit. I tried to include a lot of sort of quintessential spacey sounds, especially like at the beginning, that initial riff. And then we had that ready just in time before PAX Prime 2014, and then Greater Than Games heard it there, and they said that was their favorite of the core game music. I think because it had some like Metroid Prime style influences, and they really liked that.
Cool. All right. So one of the losing conditions for the Wagner Mars base is that the self-destruct sequence begins, and if the heroes aren't careful to keep it from running out of cards, it blows up and the game is over. So we decided to have some special music that was just for that. So this is Mars Base Countdown Expired. Yeah, so I see a number of people in the chat talking about how they didn't even realize that this kind of stuff was a thing. And this is also not the only one. You can lose, excuse me, to the countdown expire. You can lose to not time cataclysm, to Silver Gulch by getting lost in time, and you can lose to the Final Wasteland by having. Well, wait, it's a little different in Final Wasteland, right? Like there's the impossible to win scenario, which is different than losing to the environment, right?
Yeah, one is all the heroes have been removed from the game, and then the other one is, in certain games where you're required to, destroy a certain amount of characters or whatever, and all those characters have been removed from the game, then you're at a bit of a stalemate. So.
Right. Yeah. So tell us about this music, quote unquote.
Right. So, like I said originally, this was before we even had villain themes. We were just going to have one sort of you lose music, but the thing is that like it couldn't be specific to any particular villain at that point because it was just going to be used everywhere. So I made it sort of as generic as possible, and this was it. I added some explosions and stuff in there because. We just we're like, oh well, should we have special you lose music when it's the environment that you lose to instead of a villain? And so I was like, oh well, we have this thing, we could. It sounds pretty, bleak. already. So maybe if we like added an explosion or something at the beginning, that could work. So that's what we did, and this was actually the piece of music for the game that took me the least amount of time to do. Normally any given piece of music will take me a few hours at least, but this one I think I did in like 20 minutes or something, and you can probably tell it's pretty minimal.
And so Hankrite asks, out of curiosity, you didn't make one for Silver Gulch? We did make one for Silver Gulch.
There is, yes. If you get lost in time, you'll hear a piece of music that is nowhere else in the game.
And I'm 90% sure that we gave that the listening party treatment when we did the mini pack listening party.
We did, yeah.
Yeah.
So you can go watch that as well.
Indeed.
And then for the final wasteland, unfortunately, that was when I was out sick. So I think we just used the same thing minus the explosion if you lost to the final wasteland.
That sounds right. All right. So there's this conquering warlord out there. His name is Voss, and he was in charge of the Therathian Ministry of Science. His experiments on living beings proved useful in making the Therathian military a powerful force to be reckoned with. However, Voss's experiments went too far, and his transgressions quickly leaked to the public. Rather than an execution, Voss was to be exiled to a nearby ice planet. With parts from his transport pod, he managed to continue his experiments that allowed him to harness the power of the native Frosthound creatures on the planet with mindless obedience. Voss returned to his home planet and enlisted the help of the finest Therathian military to join his crew. Now, he roams the galaxy, conquering planet after planet, and enslaving its inhabitants to his command. So make way for Voss's conquering fleet. All right. Yes, we got some banging heads and some other cool stuff. So tell us about making Voss come alive musically.
Sure. So this is actually the one that took the most goes to get right. At least of the core. Actually, I think of any theme. Yeah, of any theme. Because originally when I did the theme, I think I was a bit more focused on like all the creatures he had, and so I had all these weird sounds going on. But it ended up sounding a bit too like goofy and stuff like that as a result. And like it just had this wonky thing to it. And so I put that aside because John said, well, maybe this kind of sound could be used for another villain in the future. And we actually did use a bit of that in of all choices, Wager Master's theme. So that initial bit, that was originally came from my sort of alien version of Voss's theme. So I tried a second attempt, and they want it to be more like, military war kind of thing like that. And so I used a lot of war drums for that one, but then Greater Than Games said that one was too drum heavy. And so they said, like, well, but that would be, that would work maybe for like Ambuscade's theme or something. So I ended up changing the instrumentation a bit, but it did end up being used as part of Ambuscade's theme later. That first part where he's like hiding and stuff like that, and it sounds kind of tribal. And so then I was kind of like, okay, well, I guess I'm not really getting this guy as much. And then Greater Than Games just flat out said, okay, make it like Hell March from Command and Conquer, but sort of Darth Vader-ish too. And so, in the chat here, Bjorning actually called that out and said, like, oh, the CNC, Command and Conquer callbacks in this are awesome. So, yeah, you're spot on. I pretty much just made it in that style, and then mixed in the horns and stuff. In that da-dum, 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 da-dum. That was sort of the more Darth Vader-y reference there. And yeah, so I kind of feel like of all the themes, this is the one that was most determined by Greater Than Games. Usually they just say like, something like that represents this kind of idea, and then I kind of come up with it from there. But this one, I feel like, I was kind of making it as close to something they wanted as possible. So, but yeah, happy to see that people are happy with the way that one turned out.
Very cool. All right, so we have one more environment to go over, and that is the ruins of Atlantis. Why don't you tell us about that, Jen?
All right. The ruins of Atlantis. Millennia ago, a race of ancient and mysterious beings built a great city on an island in the South Atlantic. After a series of wars rocked their civilization, the island was abandoned and eventually sank beneath the waves. Now, thousands of years later, its ruins have been discovered on the ocean floor, and the rush is on to possess the secrets of Atlantis. This ancient city will once again be a battleground as heroes strive to keep powerful, archaic weapons out of the hands of the most nefarious villains in the multiverse.
And so here is Ruins of Atlantis now. All right, the ruins of Atlantis.
Yeah, so that was the first time that I'd used sort of more complicated synths to work with. I used one called Absinthe, and honestly, I had no idea how to use it. So I just, excuse me, I went through the sort of the browser of presets there, and found stuff that I thought would sound good. And I found out later that this particular synth is actually way more complicated than most of them. I still don't really understand how to use it, but it makes really cool sounds. So most of the sounds you heard in there were from that. And then I figured out different things, like different parameters I could tweak to make it change over time, but that was about it. And so actually my first go at doing the music for this was the team found it to be a bit too chill and relaxing, like as if there's not a battle going on. And so Jeremy's like, yeah, we need something a little bit more up-tempo and a bit more ominous and stuff like that. So I made something new for that one that went in the front. And then what was originally my first pass ended up being the second half of the music. So the more subdued stuff towards the end there. And so for the first one, it's still low tempo, but it has like a lot of action, like arpeggios, like and that kind of gives it a bit more of a feeling that things are actually going on, and that it's not just kind of this beautiful, pristine location at the bottom of the ocean that nobody is around yet. And then, for the second half, the more subdued one, that's when it plays what I originally came up with for it. And then I applied some filters to it to give it sort of that underwater sound, kind of feeling like the sound itself is almost in a bubble. And I added some, different underwater sounds and some creature calls and stuff like that, just to kind of give it that atmosphere that, things are going on outside of the bubble as well.
Very cool. So, Jen, why don't you tell us a little bit about making the ruins of Atlantis?
All right. Well, the ruins of Atlantis was the first environment that I built for this game. So it was kind of a learning experience. I think Ruins of Atlantis and Insula Primalis were the two environments I was the most excited to go back and add more cameras to. Because Ruins of Atlantis, there's the temple in the middle with the ruins surrounding it inside of a bubble. And that was most of the environment, but you may have noticed some new things I added, like the phosphorescence chamber and then some other little scenes. Because there's a lot more going on there than there used to be. But yeah, this is also an environment that we were originally planning to have animated. So there's actually some obviously there's bubbles, but the background actually is rotating. It's look like the water is moving around and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's one of those things that if we had been able to do it, I still really would have loved to, is to actually have the environments animated. We've told this story many times, but basically we started from that point of view, and we realized sort of as we're moving through development that was just going to be too much. It was going to be too hard for devices to render them, and it was going to be too hard for us to do it in real time. So then we were like, well, maybe we can just capture videos and have the videos playing behind everything. And even that seemed like too much. And then when we went with stills, we found that most people were actually pretty happy with the stills. I mean, we would still love to see them animated, but I don't know, for the cost and for the time, it would have probably been too much for what it would have added to the game. So.
Yeah. Another thing with the environments is when I'm setting them up, I make them set the camera to be square, because that's the way that we use the images in the game, is in a square. So it's always exciting, when I do like the widescreen captures, it's like, oh, you can see like these things off to the side that don't actually show up in the game.
Yes.
Which you may have noticed if you're looking at the environments today. There's like little details and off to the side that you don't always see.
Right on. All right, so what do we got next, John Mark?
All right, so so next up, so now every villain has their own victory theme, and we briefly considered the idea of having a theme for each hero, but we didn't do that for two reasons. One, the time investment would have been, a lot, especially because for the base game that would have been 10 right there, but then another consideration is like, whose theme would we even play when a team of heroes is actually what won? So instead we settled on having like sort of a standard victory theme that would play whenever the heroes won. So this is it.
Hooray! We won! Woo! Go team! All right, so for those of you who've been keeping track at home, that's pretty much all the music from the core game, but we still have a little bit more that we want to share with you, because if you came to the Shattered Timelines listening party, you've already heard this next piece of music. But we wanted to include it here because, for a couple of reasons. So, number one, you guys have, thanks to stretch goals, you have funded our ability to make heroic theme songs. So we thought we would share with you the one heroic theme song that Jean-Marc has already done, which is, just to sort of recap the story about it, in Shattered Timelines, there's a villain called Iron Legacy, which is Legacy from another timeline. And Jean-Marc realized in order to really make an Iron Legacy theme song, he really needed a Legacy theme song in order to, then make it go bad. And so that was sort of the genesis of this idea of doing a hero theme song. And he mentioned it in the Sentinels Stand Victorious a second ago that, we'd consider doing the heroic themes, but it would be a lot of stuff and whatever. So now that it's funded, we can do that. So we thought we would just play this one here. Was a nice way to sort of cap things off today. So who is Legacy? Well, Paul Parsons is the son of Joseph Parsons, the man who defeated Fyodor Ramanat in the fight against the USSR. Residing in Megalopolis, Legacy always fights for the freedom, liberty, and protection of the good people of Earth against forces too strong for it to contend with. So this is America's finest Legacy. go invade Russia. I think that's what I said when we previewed that song the last time too. It's so like high energy. It's good stuff. Tell us about it, Jean-Marc.
All right, yeah. So obviously, because a legacy is sort of based on, Superman, Captain America, that kind of thing. I really wanted to kind of reference that without, it being exactly the same. But I decided that sticking to sort of a soaring, like John Williams style, strictly orchestral kind of thing seemed suitable. And of course, at this point, most of the music was either environmental, so it was a little bit more reserved in some cases, or it was villainous, so it had to have that edge of nefariousness to it. But for this one, I could just kind of go all out in the heroic, positive, like conquer the bad guy kind of thing. An example to us all. So so I just kind of it was a nice change up for me. And Jeremy, I actually think that you made a mistake. You said that we had one hero theme.
Oh, I think you're right.
Yeah.
That's my bad.
Well, that was true before, but then we got funding to do more, so I went ahead and made another one.
You went ahead and made another one? My goodness, who's it gonna be? Who's it gonna be?
Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, we took a poll to see which hero themes everyone was most looking forward to. And it was a pretty close race, actually, between some heroes. But there was one hero who stood up on top of the rest in the poll. And who was it? Who was it?
Let's find out Let's
find out
now. So what'd you guys think of Tachyon's theme song? Surprise, surprise, surprise.
Yeah, that was just sort of an idea we had a few weeks ago, was making, having one of them at least ready for the anniversary. And so we're like, which one? And then so we're like, well, why don't we have a poll, but we won't specify exactly what it was all about. So yeah, that's what we did. And the top voted for hero theme in the base game was Tachyon. So and so obviously when we were discussing how to do Tachyon's theme, we were like, well, it obviously needs to be fast, but it can't be so fast that you can't really like understand what's going on and the music's tripping over itself and stuff like that. Especially because virtual instruments can only play so fast and still sound good. And so part of the way we decided to do that was just kind of we'll have kind of double time drums and a lot of arpeggios going on underneath and stuff like that. But there would still be sort of this heroic theme sort of going on top of that. And out of all the character themes, and this includes the villains, I would say that Tachyon theme took me the longest and was the hardest to mix together. There's just quite a lot going on in there, and so getting it to all fit and not overtake anything else at all the right or wrong times took a lot of fiddling with to get it right, and also to get sort of the impact that I was looking for with some of the notes. Because in my head, I had this idea of like nonstop movement going forward, but also these moments of just like where she's just like running along, and then it's like pow, whack, flap, and then she keeps moving along. And so that's what those like distinctive hits here and there are. And yeah, so that was a ton of fun to do, and thanks for making it possible for more hero themes to come out. And for voting, and we're not going to tell you what the rest of the poll results were, but we can't wait to bring you more hero themes in the future.
Indeed, yes. It was only because of you guys that we're doing this. It was an idea that we kicked around a lot, and it was like, man, if only there was a way for us to do this and actually have it be worth our while. And so making it a stretch goal on the Kickstarter turned out to be sort of the perfect way to get it done. Because, you know, obviously, especially after hearing Legacy's theme, I knew that I wanted to hear more hero theme songs, and so I'm really psyched that we found a way to do it. All right, so it is now 10 to 2. That is all the music that we have for you today. What I thought we could do is, since I'm sure everybody would love to hear it again, we'll play the Tachyon theme again, and then we're going to take like a 5-minute break, and then we're going to have the whole team come on, and we're going to play a couple of games of Sentinels. I know, because this has been twice as long as our typical listening party. So we'll take a quick sort of 5-minute break so that the three of us that have been on for 2 hours can go take a quick bio break, and then we'll come back in probably 5 minutes after Tachyon finishes. We'll leave the stream up playing some music, and then we'll be back. So let's listen to Tachyon one more time, and then we will see you guys in about 5 minutes to play some Sentinels of the Multiverse.